Okay. Hello, everybody. Checking my everything to make sure everything looked good, and it looks like it does. Okay. I actually had a topic before I started, and when I went to type the topic in, I forgot what the topic was. So we're gonna wing it a little bit, and hopefully the topic I was gonna talk about will come back to me. It might not. We'll just go with something else, but it might come back to me. I think I'm gonna upload this on YouTube too. So for any of my YouTube people, I can start doing some more live streams on YouTube, which I might start doing also. I haven't decided yet, but if there is an interest in that, you can always put a comment in the YouTube stuff below, and then I will do that. But for now, I'm on Twitch. But I might start doing YouTube stuff also. I haven't decided yet, but I might. If there's a call for it, I think there might be now, so we might start doing that. Also, I also do a live video Zoom call, free every month, and that's on my website, which the links are all on all the pages I have. So people want to sign up for that. Some people don't like to don't want to show their picture, which is completely fine, or you don't want to show your real name, which is completely fine. But that gives more of a chance to go kind of into some deeper stuff and see what a lot of the collectives are going through, because a lot of people that are listening to a lot of specific content are kind of all going through the same thing energetically, even if it might not seem that way. You might feel kind of all by yourself, right? And sometimes we just kind of feel that no one else is going through what we're going through, and you'd be surprised how many people are. And when you kind of start developing your own collectives where there's a lot of people going through what you're going through. So just to kind of keep that in mind before we start. So, because I really can't remember my topic. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about when we can't connect, because there's been a lot of people saying that lately. I was saying that when you can't connect, there's a difference between when you can't connect and then you don't like the answer you're getting. And you know what you got to do, but you don't want to do it. So, our human's going to say, well, hell, I don't know what to do. I didn't get an answer. Most of the time we get an answer, we just don't like the answer we get. But there are actually times when we're not connected, and what we do when we're not. Because when we're not connected, those can be times that we really don't enjoy that, especially when you're used to being connected. I will say, we're going to talk a little bit about loneliness and connection, and what the difference is between when you're in your human consciousness and when you get into higher consciousness and higher aspects. The difference between when you are connected and when you're disconnected. So in our human aspects, we always want to pursue outside things when we feel lonely, right? We want to be around people. We might want to say, I'll do something to fill my time. I'll get a new hobby. I'll do this. I'll do that. But we try to connect with everything outside of us. Human consciousness is always going to try to get you to go outside. Now, there's a part when that's going to shift, and we can expand on that in a bit. But when you're talking about feeling very lonely, a lot of people will say, the person's depressed or they're lonely. They don't feel like they're connecting with anybody, any people. That is not about outside. But our human's going to try to distract us with going outside, going connecting with people. And usually that makes it worse. Because it's not the connection with people that's our problem. I don't really want to use the word problem, but we're going to. That's not really the problem, right? We're not connected with ourselves. And that's where that sense of loneliness can come in. That's when we start to feel like we're kind of the only ones on an island. And there is a lot of that in the beginning of Ascension, and really all through Ascension. I think you'll start to feel sometimes loneliness. But when you start getting into different parts of Ascension, you're like, I'm so connected in. How can I feel lonely? I don't understand. Because I'm so much more connected than I was like a couple years ago. Why am I feeling lonely? Normally that means it's time to go deeper in. We have to connect deeper, because the level of connection you achieved within yourself is now not good enough anymore, in a sense. And there's no judgment in that not good enough, but just to kind of use those words for an example, all of a sudden it's not enough. You need to go deeper in to connect deeper and deeper in. And that's when that stuff will start coming up. But you'll find you have no desire to go outside and try to figure out what's going on, right? And I think I did a stream so many, I don't know, I can't keep track of time, but about, am I bored or am I lonely? You know, which one is it? Because there is some boredom too that can go along with ascension when you're in different phases of the process. Because there are different phases of the process where we kind of can feel like we kind of want something to do, we kind of want the next thing to do, but we really can't see that yet. And that we can also get back into that disconnected state, but it's kind of in a different way, right? So if we take disconnection in another direction and say, okay, now I feel disconnected because I can't really tap into anything. You know, I'm not really getting the signs. I should go to, you know, I should go plan A or plan B or usually we have to go to plan Z and go the other way. But we get to these points where we're not really sure what we're supposed to do, you know, because we have, in a way, look at it like this. You've kind of disconnected from one frequency, but you haven't 100% connected up to the next one yet. Your body has kind of left one, but you're not anchored in the new one. And your consciousness is still going to be even above where your body is. Your consciousness you can achieve is always higher than where your body's vibration is going to be. The body's always lagging behind because it takes long to reprogram the body. You can maybe be achieving, I mean, you can go as high as you want, but if I just say 30th dimensional consciousness, right? 100th dimensional consciousness, it really doesn't matter. Put any number in front of it you want to. You can achieve that consciousness, but your body can only go but so far. Your body can only really go up to 12. At least in this moment, that's as far as most people who've anchored that far have been able to anchor. You can only get to 12 dimensional realities, which means you can start experiencing those realities in a 12th dimensional body, right? And that's what brings in the new realities. Your body has to anchor. Okay, your conscious is going to be way above that, but you can only your body's got to be anchored in. And to anchor in the body, we have to move the body out of different realities, right? So when we get to different parts of the process, we can feel kind of disconnected again. But it's a different type of disconnection. You're trying to kind of rework and connect up to you're also connecting up to a different collective. So there's a part of that, you're kind of connecting up to a different, some people call it like a light grid. You're kind of trying to connect it to a different collective, a different light grid, and you haven't really gotten there yet. You haven't connected the body yet. So you feel like you don't have any of your normal connectivity. You don't have your normal powers, and we're just going to call it powers because to us, it's just how you naturally are. You know, when people talk about telepathy, we talk about reading the field, we talk about all these sort of what people say is supernatural stuff, like reading minds and all that kind of stuff. It's all very natural because we just read the field. You know, you read the field, you kind of know it's coming. You're not really shocked at anything. You don't really get surprised. You kind of see things coming years before they get there. So we really don't even get that excited about different things anymore because we saw it coming for so long that when it gets here, we're like, oh, thank God. I thought the thing would never get here. So we don't really have that. You don't really have the emotions and the highs and the lows, you know, because your body just sets in just such a vibration that's sort of, I don't want to say it's always at peace because I can't say I feel that completely 100% of the time. When I'm clearing, I don't feel that. But you always feel this sense of knowing somewhere that you're just in a different part of the process. You're in a clearing today. And once you clear that, tomorrow you're going to feel better if you can get through the clearing and go all into the clearing. I mean, I went all into a clearing the other day where I basically just bitched and moaned for 45 minutes about everything I wanted to bitch and moan about. And the next day I felt way better and I could see what I needed to do. Because sometimes we get to the point where we say we can't see anything. You know, I can't see what I'm supposed to do. And sometimes we can't because we haven't connected up. Sometimes we know what we have to do, but we don't want to do it because we don't like what we have to do. We feel obligation to not do that. We feel obligation to fulfill any of our human contracts. And when I talk about human contracts, we're going to talk about any legal contract you get into technically is a human contract. A marriage contract, it is a human contract. Your soul does not give a shit about any human contract you have signed. Now, I will say that, and when you're still unconscious, when I say unconscious, we're just talking about you're still living from your human consciousness. That's unconscious, right? You technically don't have free will. You're technically, everything you're doing, you're kind of going through sort of a map you laid out for yourself. You're taking a longer way to get there, but you've kind of built in time for you to take the longer way to get there. You're going through a lot harder trials in a sense. You're doing things the tougher way, but we don't realize it's the tougher way because that's the only way we know how to do it. because we're still very much ingrained in our human DNA and our human consciousness. So we don't even realize I'm doing this the hard way, because we don't know another way. Everything is just this way, and that's how it's done. And everything and the human collective is going to tell you that's how you do it. Whereas when you get to the higher realities, it's kind of different. Like, as an example, normally in the human realities, people upgrade different parts of their life as they get more money, right? We're going to use this kind of simple example just to show you how backwards this can be. So, you get a promotion, you might get a new car, you get a nicer car, you get a nicer house, and all of your human existence has been kind of upgrading. You start off with a starter home, and then you get a bigger home when more money is available, whatever, and you go up that way. Normally it's a bit of a slower process. I have seen some of that process for the human reality start getting condensed a lot. And I think that's because people are kind of trying to fast forward through things. And I don't know if they realize that's what I know they don't realize that's what they're doing yet. They're fast forwarding through different parts, because I think ascension is starting a lot quicker for people now, and a lot of younger. And I don't like to bring age in, because once you bring age in, everyone starts comparing. But you see a lot of people who are just come in a little more connected than I would say people came in before. They're just coming in a little more connected. The kids are always connected, but even more connected. They're kind of going to go through it a little bit quicker. One, we don't have the time for collectives to set for a long amount of time to go through the ascension process and go through the higher consciousness, anchoring all that in. We don't have time for that. You start to see a lot of people transitioning out. COVID was a big transition out for a lot of people, as in they transitioned out through death because they weren't going to ascend here. So basically then they're going to come back and ascend again once they come back in again. And that was the choice they made, right? They're going to come back in and they're going to have it. They're going to ascend in a different body. But you start kind of seeing that going a little quicker now. I see a lot of things that felt like it used to take a long time for people to get to certain spaces in human existence. And now it just feels like a lot of people fast forward through a lot of it. And I'm kind of going to be curious to see what happens when their ascension starts, because they fast forwarded so fast, they kind of expect things to be a certain way. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a rougher transition than they might expect, because they haven't had the disillusionment yet that a lot of us got going through the human realities a little bit slower, in a sense, because one, it's also the energies hitting the earth is shifting, and all of that is causing a lot of the quickening of everything. Everyone keeps saying, oh, time's quicker. And even though time technically doesn't exist, when you're in times like this, I'm going to use time like 100 times today. I just did it again. It feels like it goes faster. Everything feels like it's speeding up, because in a way it kind of is speeding up, because we don't have the time for everyone to slog through it anymore. Whereas a lot of us who slogged through it we had longer amounts of time to get to certain places, but we were slogging through it. And now I don't see so much of the slog, but when the transition starts to come and when their DNA activates and they start going through awakening, they haven't kind of had that disillusionment so much yet. So I feel like it might be a bit of a rougher transition. That's why I think there's so many more people that are conscious and sharing consciousness and talking about consciousness, because those collectives are going to need it, because they're going to have almost like the rug pulled out from under them very quickly, where for a lot of us, I feel like it was a little bit slower burn when we started going through, awakenings can go on for years. And some people have an instant awakening. Mine kind of dragged on for a couple of years, but some people have it really quickly. But I feel like that's kind of more what we're going through, because we don't have the time anymore. It's kind of like things are running out of time. 2024 is going to be a big year for a lot of the human collectives and a lot of people who have seen that. I know I dreamed about that year and different things that might happen in that year. And a lot of people dream about a lot of people saw COVID with before it got here. They just knew 2020 was going to be a big year for the collectives. And a lot of these cycle you have like these 3-year cycles within our ascension. So this is like the 3rd year of that COVID, the COVID realities. And now you're seeing so many people start to shift, because they've gotten kind of to the end of what COVID was for them, whether it was connecting more with people or disconnecting from people. Everyone's in a different place on what it was for them. But you see a lot of people divorcing, changing jobs, changing locations, because now they've reached a certain phase in their process. Their body's in a certain vibration where they now have to go. But I do want to finish my point about how it's different, how you upgrade as you get more money. In the higher realities, when we need to upgrade, normally we're getting less money because our universe is trying to get our attention that now you need to go somewhere else. And we don't get to see, because we haven't anchored in the new one yet till we let go of the old stuff, we haven't seen it yet. So normally we get less money, but then we have to get places that are more expensive, which can get a little tricky on how we got to do that, how we kind of work around certain things. All of a sudden we'll just get these large sums of money in to fund the next thing. Or it comes in kind of backwards. So that's kind of the backwards part about ascension, where it makes no sense to a human. If you're making this much money, how are you and you can't do this, now you're gonna get a bigger place and you're gonna bring in more money, but it doesn't make sense to humans. Human consciousness doesn't make sense. So when you try to explain it to human consciousness, it doesn't make sense, because in that consciousness, it doesn't work like that. Every consciousness is going to depict the reality. And in the human reality, it doesn't work like that. In higher consciousness reality, that's how it works. Because you have to get your body to a different vibration, the place you're in. We're just going to use that as an example, the place you're living won't support that vibration. And the body is always going to put your vibration first. That is the most important thing for the soul, is the vibration of your body. It is always going to point you in the vibration that is the highest one you can get to in that moment. And if you're resisting that, that's when it gets rougher. And that's when you're going to continue to feel the squeeze to get you to that next step. Even in human consciousness, it's happening. It's just happening at a different pace, and you don't realize consciously that's what's happening. But it's always going to be the most important thing. And when I say it doesn't care about contracts, it doesn't care about human contracts. It doesn't care about the fact you were married to this person and now you feel like that's not aligned anymore. Now you got to go do something else. Now, there is a part we have to exit these realities respectfully. I see a lot of people using that, when you talk about metaphysical stuff, and you talk about, even if you get into the twin flame stuff, and people who left spouses because they fell in love with another person, and they're trying to kind of human reason it. Well, that was a twin and I had to go. And I'm not saying that was not the decision that had to be made, but it might have been a better way to make that decision than running away and hurting people in the reality, right? And there's a lot of that can go on, and I'll see that kind of as they kind of hide behind that, but that was a human contract and I can break that. You can get it out of a human contract, but you still want to do it as respectfully as possible and not feel like I have a pass card, just run away from everything that I created as a human, because we can kind of sidestep it for a while, but a lot of times our universe only lets us sidestep it because we don't have enough of our soul light embodied in yet, because the soul is outside the body. When you're in your human consciousness, there's very little in the body. They can't really fit in there. So if anyone has ever had energetic readings done, you'll have a lot of people that'll say, oh, your soul's not even in there. I remember the first time said that to me, and I'm like, what do you mean my soul's not in there? Of course it's in there. And I'm like, no, it's over here. It's not even in there anymore. It has exited. It's a slow exodus, and it's not even in there anymore. It has no desire to be in the body anymore. It's out there somewhere. So it kind of reminds me of that show Angel, when the vampire from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when they would bring his soul back in, and all of a sudden he was like, oh, this is terrible. Or, I'm remembering all the stuff I've done. I feel so guilty for everything. That's kind of what happens in a sense, but it's not really that it makes us feel the guilt. It's trying to clear that stuff from our body. That's what kind of took it in a different way. That when he was soulless, he was terrible. And our human kind of is terrible. We don't see it as being terrible. We have this really kind of interesting comparison to what terrible is as humans, that as long as we're not murdering people, we're better than the people who are in our human consciousness. Like that somehow there's a bar there. We can be as terrible to people as we want to, but as long as we don't cross any legal, anything that's illegal technically, then we're not so bad. No, we're still living as good little humans. But in the grand scheme of everything, there's really not this is worse than something else. We don't really hold respect for each other. And we get into that when we talk about human integrity. We talk about soul integrity. And, it's more of the integrity to the system. If you have integrity to the human system, that's human integrity. If you have integrity to the soul and new realities you're building on a soul level, That's where you're line. That's the collective you're going to attach up to, not human realities anymore. And that means what's your money supporting? Who are you supporting? Where are you taking money from? A lot of times we find we move into different realities. We really can't take money from certain people and certain places because it's not aligned. The money, in a sense, is kind of tainted and we can't really take it, which makes things more challenging sometimes because we have to do kind of things the harder way, and we can't do it that way. I got to do it this way. I can't do it that way. But we know what we can do and what we're not supposed to do, because normally we'll take the money from places that we probably knew we shouldn't have, and then we get the karmic slap when we have to kind of get the retribution of that reality because we didn't care so much where the money came from and we were just kind of taking it. We also didn't know better. So one of the things about consciousness is that once we know better, we get slapped very quickly. You kind of have a little bit of a pass card in your human realities where that karmic slap can come in a lot later, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later. Sometimes you'll see people do stuff and you think, no, but I do feel like everything else, that's speeding up. And you can see the karmic stuff come back in very quickly for people now. Quicker than it used to be, though I still think it's longer when you're in your human realities because it takes things longer to come in, number one. We trudge through reality slower in our human realities than we do in our higher vibrational realities. They have a different pace to them because we're distracted by a lot. We don't really focus on the reality. We focus on everything else. So there's a different pace to it. There's a different sense to it in a way. And we kind of don't really see what we're supposed to do. So when we're in our human realities, in a way, we get a little bit of a pass card because we don't know what we're doing. We're like children running around. We're being mean to people. We're trying to manipulate other people to get what we want, whether we're doing it through sex, we're doing it through money, whatever, however we're doing it. We're trying to do all this stuff. We're creating all this really messed up stuff. And we don't realize how messed up it is until we start transitioning to higher consciousness realities and realize what a mess we made. So a lot of us will kind of jettison out of certain realities because we don't have enough soul light anchored in the body yet to really fix it. But you kind of put almost like a pin in it and you go, I'll get back to that. I know I got to somehow align that, but right now I can't really do that. So I'm just going to get out and work on other things I can do, knowing that I got a couple ends over here, but I'll have to come back to at some point, whether it's a relationship and you go through it with the person again, or you get a new person, but the energy comes through again, because you're going to keep going through it until you show your universe, which just higher aspects of you, that you can handle that situation. You can handle that situation from a higher consciousness aspect, not your human aspect. You're not going to go human again, separate off and be all consumed with human stuff. Your human might be in there and not like the situation, but it's not where we make decisions from. Because it really should never make decisions. But in our human consciousness, we let our human make decisions. Even though our higher consciousness aspects is kind of going to let it make decisions until eventually it'll box itself in a corner and everything will kind of collapse. And that's what happens with human realities, right? Eventually you just make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, in a sense. I don't really want to put the bad on it, but I am for this. Decisions that aren't going to lead where you want it to. And eventually it just kind of caves in. Whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I've seen some realities, you could see how distorted they started, and they've gone on for 8 years. And now you're starting to see some of that come back around again, where the reality starts to collapse. Though there are probably along the way a lot of times where, because I know I had a lot of realities along the way when I was in my human consciousness that I could see they were collapsing, but I stayed with them and let the whole thing completely collapse. Now, sometimes we will kind of know we're in a reality, but this is when it gets into the consciousness aspect. If you can't tell the difference, that's when we really have to connect and get very set on, are we disconnected because we don't want to see the answer, or are we really disconnected because we're tuning into something else? And we kind of got to be honest with ourselves. Is it I can't see it, or I don't want to see it? In our human consciousness, there are a lot of things we look back on, and you look back now and go, oh, there are a lot of signs and those human realities I created that I had to get out earlier than I actually did. I let it collapse. Because you're in a higher consciousness now. You can never align a reality from the consciousness of that reality. You have to be higher than that consciously. And then you can see the whole reality. But when you're in the reality, you only see a facet of the reality. You have to get your consciousness above the vibration of your body that's setting in that reality until you can see it, and then see what you got to do to then bring the body up to the next reality. And a lot of people will try to align the reality when you're in the consciousness of it and they can't see it yet because they're only seeing part of it. You're only seeing a piece of it. You're not seeing the entire thing. You can only see what you want to see. And you're going to create the human story around it, whatever that human story is, right? Whatever kind of hooks you into the human realities, whether it's money, whether it's love, it's the twin flame whole saga people will go through. It doesn't really matter what the carrot is dangled that kind of gets you to go back and play in the human realities. For a while, the human collectives will always kind of do that. They'll always kind of dangle that carrot to try to get you back in. It's important to get you back in because the collective's strong when so many people are in it, because you can't collapse the collective from inside of the collective. You see a lot of people trying to fight against the collectives, right? Or fight against what they would see as the power of the human reality, right? And that now, in a way, that's part of their journey to speak up for themselves, right? And to organize and let's all speak up against something we don't feel is going to fly anymore, whatever that is. So it's a conscious act that we're going to speak up. We never did speak up before. Now let's speak up and say we don't like that. It's still from an unconscious place in a sense, because they're trying to kind of battle it out from within the reality, within the collective. And you have to kind of remember that you can't really change when you're going in with a different, if you even imagine like you're going in a room and everyone has been in this room for a long time and you used to be in that room and you go out of the room for maybe, I don't know, a couple weeks and come back in the room, technically you're at a different vibration and now you see it differently. But still everyone in that room is still in that collective consciousness. You just exited the room for a little while. So now you have a different view on it, right? You have a different consciousness on it. But if you go in and try to impose that consciousness on everyone in that room, it's not, we have to be respectful of where everybody is. And in that collective will collapse on its own. The more people who pull out of that collective, the collective weakens and eventually it collapses. You see that all through, if we're going to even go into, I don't like to use time, I don't like to use past, present, or future because it's all simultaneously. But all collectives eventually go because people either pull out of the collective consciously or they will die and that collective eventually dies off, right? If you try to look at it even in a linear human term, right? You can kind of see how that happens. Stuff that used to go on 200 or 300 years ago is now completely ridiculous because those collectives are now gone and now there's new collectives. That's how when you get into trying to judge collectives that lived so many years ago, where your consciousness technically was in that collective, just in a different, multidimensionally, you're still in that collective in a way. And we try to judge what that was. We try to sit and go, no, that was wrong. Well, in that collective, that was the collective. We look at it now and think it's weird, but once you pull out of the collective you're in now, you're going to think that one's weird. And I can't believe you thought that. I can't believe we ever thought that was okay. It's kind of like if someone came back and said, hey, everyone has to get rid of their cell phone because it's, I'll make up a story. It's, it's killing the earth. All the cell phones are killing the earth. Everyone's got to get rid of them. Just throw them away. I would love to see how many people line up to throw them in the trash. Because you would be ostracized from that collective. And that's a large collective, right? You'd be ostracized from that. And it would be the same thing because that collective has a stronghold in a sense. Now, the more people that pull out of that collective, the weaker it gets. And eventually things start to shift. And that's the slower shift of the collectives. But you can see all how things have shifted. But we really can't speak up at so much when we're the only voice in the room. You're kind of the new voice in the room with something to say that's not that collective. Unless someone asks for your opinion, and this goes in anywhere you enter, technically you're now in a little mini collective, right? If no one asks for your opinion, there's no point to give it. I mean, you might be able to drop a seed to get someone to think about something. I mean, I'll do that all the time, but if no one asks my opinion, there's no reason to give it because one, you're not open to the consciousness to hear it. So giving it is just, I want to give it. Now I'm unconscious and I want to give my opinion. So we also have to be respectful of the collectives and how they're going to play out their realities and just exit the collective. But a lot of people want to because they've had that expansion of consciousness and can see, even though they still don't see they're operating from an old program in a sense, but it's still a step forward in their ascension. We all have those steps forward. It's not the highest consciousness ever, but it's a conscious act from an unconscious program. So I'm going to go in and we're going to change this now, not realizing that what's really going to change it is you just got to exit it. Eventually it'll collapse when enough people exit the collective. Eventually it'll leave. And that's how the collectives start to get weaker and weaker. And you link up to a different collective and you kind of leave that behind. We don't like walking out of that room and leaving it behind because we have a story about all the stuff we're going to leave behind. All the fun we're going to miss out on when they have a big office party in there and we're not there anymore. You know, we have all the stories on what's happening when we're not there. And I made the comment before, everything looks better when it's walking away. You know, everything that when it's leaving, all of a sudden that's the best shit we ever had and we want to try to get it back because it's just not there anymore. But we can't really re-enter it anymore because you're not having fun there. It's a party you're not going to have fun at. And it's technically a party you're not invited to. So there comes a time in our consciousness journeys where we realize and we really start to feel it. We have no desire to be somewhere we were not invited to be in. There is no joy in putting ourselves in a place we weren't invited to. Now, there will be certain places you'll see you're supposed to go, and you might be one of the more conscious people in that environment, and you're there for a reason, but it's not to really impose it's kind of practice in a sense where you can get used to dealing with people in different consciousnesses and holding your own wherever your consciousness sets, holding it and not separating off to agree with people who are in a human consciousness still. So some of it's that we kind of practice and see, okay, what point, it's not just like a big playground in a sense. At what point did I go unconscious? At what point did I agree with that person? Why did I agree with that person when I knew that's not really true? There are ways we can kind of say something and it can blow someone's mind, but you're really not imposing. Like I'll have a lot of people, they'll just be talking about something and they'll ask me a question about something. And I'll say, oh, well, you should just dream on that. And I'll give them ways they can dream on it. Because when you say dream, everyone likes to hear about dreams, in a sense, their dreams. They want to talk about their dreams. So if you tell people they can dream on something and get more of an answer, everyone's kind of interested in that. And that's an easy way to kind of plant a seed about the dream space and how powerful it is without blowing up their world in a sense. Because eventually the world's going to blow up on its own. You don't have to do anything for that to happen. All of our human existences blow up on their own. They're made with a ticking time bomb in a sense. You know, they're built on sand. They're eventually going to wash away. Does it wash away tomorrow? Is this my year it washes away? Or is it 10 years from now that my yard washes away and I'm going to watch the neighbor's yard washes away this year, but mine's still good. And you're starting to see a lot of that. Whereas the human consciousness is always going to focus on itself, and it'll feel like it's focusing on things it cares about, but it only cares about those things because it has an identity to those things. It has an attachment to those things. That's why it's almost like an extension of itself in a sense. And in a way, it's also not only an extension of itself, it's a cord of attachment to those things. It's corded to them. So they kind of feel like, oh, I'm doing this for my family. You're still doing it for yourself because you have an attachment to everything. You know, humans have an attachment to everything. So even when we try to spin it as, oh no, I don't really care about that. I only care about this. As long as, my family's okay, then everything else. And I've heard people say that, but they still think it's kind of self-righteous in a sense. But they only really care about that because they have an obligation to care about that. And they have a story around that. And they have attachment to it. They have a human attachment to it. They have a human love for that stuff. And even if maybe not taking care of someone in your family might be a better thing for their consciousness journey, we have all the story about why we have to kind of save people from themselves. And that goes into kind of a distortion of a lot of the Christ energy, that savior. We don't want the train to hit. I know that person. I don't want their reality to wash away. Let me see what I can do to assist in that. But I don't really care about that person, so theirs can wash away. And I don't really care about what's going on over there because I don't live in that state. That doesn't matter to me. You'll be surprised where your lines get drawn as humans as to what's acceptable and what's not. And you can tell what's not in the collectives now because that's what keeps happening. Some things are acceptable in the collectives and it doesn't impact them, but the things that are not acceptable in those collectives keeps happening. because it's a shock value. It shakes up that collective. That bothers them. Different people killing each other might not bother people, but an animal getting hurt or abused, that gets people's attention because there's a line there for some reason. It's a lot of really interesting when you start looking at how the human will kind of segregate off that that's not okay, but I'm kind of used to this, but I don't like that. Certain segments of the population are kind of protected in a sense. We don't like to see certain things happen to certain segments of the population. We don't like that. That's why it keeps happening to those segments of the population. We're like, why do these terrible things happen to this group, whatever it would be? Because that's what clears. That's what we all get pissed about. That's what makes us want something to shift. That's what makes us mad. We're the reason it keeps happening to those collectives because that's the collective that gets our attention. Look at what collectives get your attention. Look at what bothers you more. We feed into all those things. Those things don't happen if it doesn't bother us in a sense. If we weren't so desensitized to everything. And as humans, we kind of start to say, like I said, it's a blurred line with humans as to what okay and what's not okay. And also depending on what side you're on. It's kind of the same side about the energy of persecution, which a lot of people have thrown out that word so much in the last a lot of the COVID realities was dealing with a lot of persecution and clearing persecution. You were okay with persecution. And when I say you, I don't mean anyone specifically, but just those collectives you're okay with persecution in our human consciousness, and we're not the ones getting persecuted against. Then it's okay. The minute it's something that I don't agree with, now it's persecution. So you even can see how now technically we're clearing persecution when we're going through that. And you can see that clear because now wait a minute, it's like now it's affecting me. Humans won't care till it affects them. That's why the line keeps going. You keep getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And it's like the sandwich effect. You start squeezing one collective and everyone else is eventually going to get squeezed too. But until those collectives feel a squeeze, it's okay. So we really have to, I'm going to open up my chat now. We really have to look at what part of things start to squeeze us. When do we sit here and say, okay, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the squeeze. Now you got my attention because now it directly affects me. Look at what doesn't bother you unless it directly affects you. Now there's a part in consciousness where, and this is more kind of on an emotional level, a feeling level, like what gets to you, what doesn't get to you, because there is a part, the more conscious you become, that if it's technically not in your reality, it's technically not ours. Now, if you have a response to it, then that's yours. If you see something and it's upsetting, a lot of people would say, oh, I'm just empathic. I feel the other people being upset. You feel your own upset. You feel the feeling because someone else is also having that feeling and it activates it in you. Same thing can happen if you feel someone that is in complete bliss or joy about something. It'll activate that feeling in you. But you're not feeling somebody else's stuff. You technically can't feel anybody else's stuff. We like to say that because we don't want to have the accountability for it. We don't want to have to say, oh, that's ours. We always want to say, no, it belongs to somebody else. That's not mine. The only time it's not yours is when you really have no feeling about it whatsoever. And the only time it's going to present is for you to see that you don't hold it anymore, but technically you're still going to hold it in your DNA or it couldn't present at all. That's why the collectives have to shift. If the collectives don't shift, then the collectives never shift. We can't finish different phases of our ascension process because technically on a DNA cellular level, we're still connected to those collectives. That's why you'll go through these micro clearings and then the collectives will clear it. And then all of a sudden you go through it when they go through it, maybe on a lesser level. Normally it is more on a lesser level. There might be nothing going on. You just might be clearing a lot of fear one day, but there's nothing really going on in your reality because you technically cleared that 4 years ago through different experiences you had created to clear it. But now you just are feeling it, or you might be throwing up because you're clearing self-empowerment, self-worth. But you might have said, well, I thought I'd done a lot of that a couple of years ago in my process, but now I'm doing it again because some of the collectives are starting to do it. So if it appears at all, it's still in the body somewhere. You just have no emotion to it in a sense. You kind of look at it and you're like, I see it, but I really don't feel anything for it. It kind of almost feels like you're watching a movie and it's like news playing in the background of a movie. But it feels not real. You feel disconnected from it. So it goes back to how we started with that disconnection. You feel disconnected from it because you are technically disconnected from it. Your consciousness is disconnected from it. But the body, on a DNA cellular level, you're still connected to it. But your consciousness isn't there anymore. So when you see it, it almost feels like fake. Like you're watching a movie and there's news playing in the background. That's how it feels when you start to watch the news. You're like, oh, well, none of that's real. I heard someone say that the other day, that they used to work for, I don't remember, a certain radio station, and they had gone through different spaces of awakening, pre-awakening. And they were saying, oh, I can't even listen to that anymore because I know it's all not true. None of it feels real to me because what they were reporting about them wasn't true, in a sense. We're going to use truth in air quotes there. What they were reporting about them wasn't true. So now everything they hear, they're like, well, I don't know if that's true either anymore because what you said about me wasn't true. So now I kind of question everything. And that's kind of what starts to happen. Once you start pulling on the thread and the whole human reality start to unravel, you don't trust anything in the human realities. Technically, none of it's true. Because the consciousness you're now in, none of that's really true. It is now something else, right? It is now you're looking at a different part of the reality. No, it's just live here. I am just live here right now, but I usually repurpose them for other places. Different places, I'll put it on different things. Okay, so I think that's it for me, unless I have a specific question about anything I covered, and then I will answer that. But if I don't, I will sign off. So I'll give that a second because there is a bit of a delay there, and then I'll get back to other stuff. So we'll give that a second. Just keep in mind, when you start unraveling anything, when you start pulling on any human reality, it'll start to unravel. The question is going to become, can you see it unravel? Can you see it for what it really is? Or are we going to keep telling ourselves the story that it's okay? Like that's how reality really is, and we know it's not anymore. So, okay, I will leave you with that.